Mr. Riccitelli became very ill with a stomach virus in the middle of the night last night and is mortified that he is not able to be here this evening. But I told him that if there were questions that we could not answer, then we would certainly have him address them tomorrow. Okay, I just want to let you know.
So I'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just to note for the record that Dr. Gregory is in transit from the family issue that she was called away, so she's not sure if she's going to get here. She's trying, so we can make a note that she's not here at this time. And I just wanted to, before I turn the meeting over to Dr. Fieser to go over the questions, there's a lot of information to go over. So I'd just like to hopefully have agreement from the board that we will, first I'd like you to, if you have a comment or discussion item on a question, wait to be recognized. And we could maybe ask one question at a time and let somebody else have a turn to ask a question, and we can go around, just to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak, rather than asking numerous questions at once. Does anybody object to that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
That if we have questions,
right.
we ask them one person ask one question at a time, so that then we'll go on to other questions and then go back. Everybody will get a chance to ask their questions, but I think if we let, it'll just give everybody a chance to speak. So I'll turn the meeting over to Dr. Fieser.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking the board for forwarding us your questions. They're helpful to us to get them, and the fact that we were able to answer all but one, including the ones that we received today, I think is beneficial to all of us, for us to have a better sense of where you are with respect to areas that you may be confused on or want more information on. And meanwhile, for us to be able to provide those answers will hopefully give you more information and needed information as you move forward next week to having to make a decision around the budget itself. So with that, we'll begin with a set of questions that were emailed to you yesterday, and you all should have a hard copy. I will say that the way these are arranged, they came in from a number of you, so what we did is we had a general category. If there were questions that weren't specific to a line item, that asked about dollars in a line item, we kind of categorized them as general questions. And then we moved into questions that were specific to the 1,000s or the 3,000s or the 6,000s accounts. And then there were a number of questions around that really tied to one of the frequently asked questions, the FAQs in the back and the appendices. So that's how they're laid out here, just so everybody understands that. Okay? So let's begin, and hopefully all of you have had a chance. I'm not going to read through all of this because you don't need to sit and hear me read this. But I will just reference each question, and if what has been provided as an answer is inadequate or needs further explanation, then you need to let us know. So the first question had to do with, clarification around what is expended versus adopted mean. This is on Roman numeral 7 in the budget, and the question as written is actually correct. So I think hopefully all of you understand that when, in any of the columns, 2013, 14, 14, 15, expended means literally that's the money that was expended. We don't have that for 2015, 16 because obviously we're in the midst of the year. And adopted is adopted. It's the board's adopted amount. The second one, can we assume that the budget assumptions, that percentage increases, cued off of that? Yes, just remember that the budget assumptions, they're assumptions and they're not in stone. So for example, we make an assumption around how much health insurance will increase, but at the time we don't have that exact amount. In fact, we don't have necessarily that exact amount right now. 3, is it possible to provide a summary chart showing the Board of Ed budgets for the past 4 years? That's in your appendices. And If there are questions on that, I believe that's Exhibit 1. So again, that's in the back. Sorry, these aren't numbered, but it's right after the actual questions themselves. Is Exhibit 1? It isn't. Yes, it is Exhibit 1.
Yes, Exhibit 1 to
So
question
if
number
there's
2.
no questions on that, you see that it's 2012 through 2015-16, that's 4 years.
I just have one question. This is not what was presented to the alderman. This is what actually was adopted, right?
This is the board's adopted budget, that's correct. That's correct.
This doesn't represent the request, it represents the actual adoption, because there were some years in which cuts were made that are reflected here, but not necessarily, there may have been a request higher than these amounts that were cut back, especially I think in 14-15 it was a
So as a clarification, the Board of Aldermen votes on a budget and they set the percent increase.
right.
If the percent increase differs, well, whether or not it differs with the board then takes up the budget and the recommendation, or the decision by the alderman, and can make adjustments to its budget, not to the percent, but to the monies.
To where the money is
Correct.
distributed.
And so it may be, so for example, very simply, last year, the percent was agreed upon by the Board of Aldermen. One of the changes that was made, which was a minor one by the board, is to reinstate putting media aides in each of the elementary schools, full-time media aides in each of the elementary schools, which had been eliminated previously by the board, but then was revisited in May. But there may also be that the aldermen cut us. They can cut us, but they can't tell us where. So then the board. So the adopted increase is literally what the Board of Aldermen did, but what actually is contained within the dollars is the decision of the board. Yes.
Federico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, in your opening letter, you said that the .853 was the lowest percentage. I'm assuming it's
Superintendent's.
the lowest requested percentage.
Correct. Yeah, so we use the superintendent's proposed.
Yep.
Then it's the board's recommended.
Okay.
And then ultimately in May, it becomes the board's adopted
Okay.
budget.
So we can assume in 2014-15, the proposed was higher than a .4 increase. That was the result of cuts from the alderman, as I remember.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, number 4, provide a complete cost analysis of the proposed pre-K program. And so this is what the costs are expected to be. Again, they may vary. We set as a dollar figure for teachers each year in the budget. When we don't have an exact figure, we determine what's sort of like an average. Am I correct, Terry, on that? And so this year, 62,500 is what we're assuming would be the average teacher salary that might be hired next year. The other salaries are actual salaries that are in the budget itself. And then we also wanted to just make a note that, you know, there may be furnishings and instructional resources that actually exist right now that we can draw upon. But that's what we would see would be the cost. Okay. So 5, provide a brief summary of the community conversation about Milford's desired profile. The intent of the community conversation is really to hear about, from the community about the career pathways, but quite honestly, that's one piece in a larger question that we would really want to be posing to the public around really what do we want to see in our high school graduates with respect to their preparation and as they leave the high school, and the implications of that then for the way our current high schools, our programs, et cetera. So that's what we really would like to see. And interestingly enough, it's not written in here, but I was just at a meeting last week with I'm on the board of directors of the Connecticut Superintendents Association, and one of the folks, who happens to be Larry Schaefer, who used to be the assistant superintendent and then was interim superintendent here, he's now retired, works for CAPS, and he brought forth an idea to all of us that were there, where he would like to pull together a group of 20 to 35 districts to start to reimagining high schools. And what he would like to do is to have, if the districts who would be a part of this would have community conversation and do surveys and start to gather data from their communities around high schools. And so, you know, when I heard about that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's part of what we are wanting to do as well. So that's really what we're talking about. It hasn't been given shape yet, but we know it's the piece on the pathways goes back to the Long-Range Planning Committee and to a directive by the Board of Education that we would develop pathways. So we chose the piece on computer science, and you'll hear more about that tonight, but we felt that moving forward, we really needed to hear from the public, and quite frankly, the board really needs to weigh in. We felt that was really important. So that's that piece of it, if that's enough at this point. Please provide the detailed plans for the proposed computer science career pathways. That's in Exhibit 2. And if I may, you know, you have this here. We have both Justine LaSala, who is the supervisor of science and the technical arts, career in technical arts in the school system, and Lisa Swanson, who's supervisor of math and business, who actually have really spearheaded this whole piece around computer science. And Mrs. Glennon, if we could take 5 minutes so that the board could really hear in more detail, because contrary to what people may think, a lot of planning has gone into this, and it goes back actually 3 years ago. So with that, Justine or Lisa, which one of you are beginning?
Sure, I'll start. I guess we just wanted to give an overview of the career pathway idea, and then more specifically about the computer science pathway. We developed a definition of the pathway in that, and that's also in that document that you have, that a career pathway is characterized by concentration in a particular field of study through a sequence of courses which lead to the development of a particular set of knowledge and skills aligned with career interests. And the pathway will culminate in a student-driven learning experience. Ultimately, the goals of our career pathways is to multifaceted goals, connecting learning in the high school to real-world applications, including focused learning that is individualized based on student interests. Our beliefs that career pathways will allow for the development of innovative opportunities for students within our own school system, and also prepare students for success in college and careers. The other big goal for our career pathways is aligning those pathways with the actual industry sectors that exist in our community and our state, so that students can see possible careers locally in our area. And then I'll send it over to Lisa and talk about why we went with computer science specifically.
So there's certainly a lot of different career pathways to select. So you could wonder why computer science for our first pathway. And really, computer science teaches students how to really think and develop efficient problem-solving skills. It's about logic, it's about problem-solving, and it's about creativity. Our students consume technology a lot. They use iPhones, they use Android devices, they use computers, but it's really important to also understand what they're using, how that's designed, and the reality is the jobs out there are predicted to be tremendous in this field. So in a Connecticut statistic alone, there are currently 9,098 open computing jobs, and that is in every field. Everybody's looking for computer programmers. They can't find enough of them. So when you look at some of the statistics that have been done by national organizations such as the Gallup poll, when they surveyed parents, there's a need. One of the statistics, I actually found two, but said two-thirds of the parents said computer science would be something they'd want to see in their child's education. And that was a national poll. It's really one of the fastest growing industries, information technology and computer science. I mean, we hear about it, I think, every day. No, we're not Silicon Valley, but 9,098 jobs in Little Connecticut, you know, compared to some other states. And we're making $92,000 doing that on average in this state, when the median income in this state is $55,000. So we really felt that when we assessed our options within our departments and looking at what we had, where our students were gaining interest, we had put in a course on app design. That course blew us out of the water with the number of requests, and that was a half-year credit. We then added in another piece. Justine will go into further kind of details of what we developed over time, but even in our, when we tried just to add one simple app design course, students really flocked to it, and we couldn't fulfill that need by our students. So we've continued to develop this over time. So I'm going to turn it back over to Justine, who can talk a little bit more about kind of where we were and where we've come to. I kind of went there.
No, that's good, thank you. So just to give you a little bit of background on the process of the development of this, we started as supervisors in 2012. And at that point, Lisa and I, as supervisors of career and technical education, in addition to math and science, looking at our current programs, what we were offering, what we were running, what they looked like, we really started to develop a vision of our career and technical education supporting college and career readiness and focusing on possible careers for kids. Through that process, we had met some folks from the computer science department at Trinity, where we got involved in the app design program, which was a pilot of an AP computer science course. So we piloted that. Those of you who are on the board remember we brought the kids in to share the work that they had done in app design. Huge, like Lisa said, the student interest has been huge numbers of kids requesting these courses. When I would go into classrooms, students would say, when are we going to have this kind of program? Are we going to have more? What's next? We added another course this year, Computers, Electronics, and Programming, to give kids a little bit of the hardware side as well as the programming side. And at the same time, there's been a lot of momentum around the push for computer science in high schools. Code.org has become very vocal about this as well. Where we are now is also, this year in the middle schools, we did an hour of code with all the kids, all 3 middle schools. And students loved it, loved it, loved it. It was extremely popular. So that has been kind of the process over 3 or 4 years building this program. We still have next steps to go. But just to give you a background of where we are and what we're thinking around it. So we'd take any questions, happy to answer anything that you have.
Mr. Whiskeyman.
In general, how does this tie into general college preparation in the sciences for math, for physics, and for chemistry, which are the foundations of engineering as well as computer science? In the science set, as opposed to the application side, which is the computer programming focus, in which in one case you're talking about designing computers, and the other case you're talking about programming the software. So one focuses and generates a tendency toward designing the hardware versus designing the software. So where do you see this fitting, or are you trying to be more general in your approach?
Absolutely trying to be more general. When I think of what you mentioned around physics and chemistry, that to me would be more of an engineering strand, yes. Whereas this is more of a computer science focus, where kids could have experiences in both hardware and software, just to get, again, this was a hole that we had in our, and most high schools don't offer these types of programs, for kids to have a background of, this may be something that I want to pursue after high school. I might want to go into a training program to work in IT, or I might want to study computer science or computer engineering in college.
So somewhere in here should be theory of computing, or introduction to theory of computing.
So our introductory course, where our plan is to add next year a new course called Introduction to Computer Science. but it's basically that idea. It's the introduction to what computing is, human-computer interaction, all that kind of piece.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Mr.
Yeah.
Jagodzinski?
My principal concern is the impact that this is going to have on other areas. We basically have approximately 900 hours a year. If we're spending time on this, what are we giving up?
Well, one of the things I would say is that this is not required of any student at all. This is purely elective, and there's another question that somebody asked later about, are kids going to be mandated to do this if they start to go through it? Are they locked in, which they are not? So this is an elective pathway. It's not something that kids have to take.
But maybe not in the middle school. We don't have electives in the middle school, do we?
We don't have electives, but and you can speak further to it, because that was also a question that was asked, and we're still debating on, do we require all kids to have it? Do we give them choice? Do you want to speak to that, Mr. Burt?
Sure. I mean, if you turn to question number 42, which is the second section that was handed out this evening, part of that was, what are we requiring of students at all levels, both middle school and high school level? Also, if you turn to question number 45, what I think I'll do is address your first concern, which was about what are we possibly eliminating or limiting our students' ability to take other courses. I think it's important to know that our high schools are comprehensive high schools. And I did a brief count, and this is not entirely accurate, but we have over 140 electives. So if you stick with the core requirements of 15.5 core credits for graduation, that leaves you, in essence, 16.5 courses or credits to take electives of your choice. Now, that's a tremendous amount of choice for our students. Are they going to be able to take everything? Obviously, they wouldn't be able to fit in 140 courses into their schedule. It would take them 10 years. So part of the process of guidance and working with parents and working with students is really discovering what their interests were, what kind of possible, career or college pathways they might be interested in, and then helping them guide into those particular courses. For instance, if you have an aptitude in art, then perhaps your end goal is a 3D AP art course, studio art course, or language. Maybe you want to take 5 years or 6 years of Spanish. That's up to you, based on your competencies and your interests. So it's really it's a mix of student interest, guidance from our faculty and from our staff. Now, obviously, what we want to have happen in middle school is give students a wide variety of opportunities to explore some of these different courses so they get a little bit of a sense. Now, it's difficult to peg someone in 7th grade. I don't know if you recall your 7th grade. I might have been a fireman or a spaceman at that point, who knows. But we don't want to lock kids into things in 7th grade, because that's going to limit their ability to make choices later on. So, as you can see from question number 42, I can't give you a very specific answer as to what the courses might look like in the middle school, because we are currently reviewing our middle school schedule. And there's some questions that are coming about as we do that review. And one of them is about electives. Do we, as in, I'll give you my past 2 districts, every student took every elective, at some point. And in my previous district, that means it was only for 30 days, but they were exposed to things like family consumer science, tech ed, food, computer sciences, etc. So there's a variety of things that they were all exposed to. That was a little hectic. 30 days isn't a lot of time for them to get involved with a course. So we're undergoing that discussion of, do we have students take every class that are exposed to everything, or do we allow for some student choice? So that's a discussion we're having now. To give you an example, if we went to student choice with technology class, students would have the option to take it in either 7th or 8th grade. So that would, again, might be more about interests and their recommendations from parents and from guidance counselors and faculty of maybe these are some of the things you should explore. Of course, we don't want to exclude people from those courses, and one of the questions asked was, well, what if students get into the pathway in 8th grade? Are they locked in? As you can see from question number 44, it's not a locked-in program. Students can take any of the courses at any time. There's no entry or exit per se. Realistically, this is just an acknowledgement of those students that choose to take this series of courses, and then the one requirement to be acknowledged as a career pathway in computer science is the capstone project at the end. So, and we're still determining how that would look in terms of recognition for achieving the end of this pathway. It could be a certificate, it could be a sash that you wear at graduation, it could be on your transcript. We're not quite sure yet. We have a couple years before we have to make that determination. But again, the key is that we're not locking kids. It's not like choosing a major in college. You know, by your sophomore year, you're going to be an engineering major, and then, you know, you want to be, you know, medieval French literature. By the time you're a senior, you're pretty stuck, you know, being an engineer because of all the coursework you've done.
Even the electives, I'm sorry, even the electives raises the same concern. My understanding is that in 6th grade we spend twice as much time on language arts as we do in the 7th and 8th grade. And looking at the results from the state tests, we go from, and comparing it to comparable school districts, we go from below average in the 5th grade to above average in the 6th grade. And then when we drop back on the amount of time spent on language arts, we drop back below average. And the following year, we drop down even more. So, you know, time on task seems to be a critical factor in the academic performance of the schools. And anything that affects the time on task that we devote to the core academics, language arts, mathematics, science at appropriate grades, seems to me to be very critical. So when we talk about electives, if it's going to, affect those areas, I'm very reluctant to see us do that. Go ahead.
Yes, Mrs. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to say, I think it's a great idea, and I like the fact that, not only, I hope that students will choose this pathway and stick with it, but I like the fact that it's also an opportunity to try something out at a younger age, and if they don't like it, they can find something else, whereas if they wait until they get to college, as you said, and that's their major, they could be stuck with it. So I think it's a great opportunity. I want to ask about the cost in the budget, because it's $4,500, and that just seems surprisingly low for what we're offering. So if someone could speak to that.
Sure. I mean, thanks to the efforts of our instructional supervisors and our faculty, we were able to introduce a lot of these courses through existing faculty FTEs. Specifically, for instance, the AP course now is just a renaming of a current existing course, correct? In addition, a lot of the resources, for instance, the coding software, code.org, the hour code, that's free. A lot of the tools that are necessary to produce apps or to research these things are online for free.
Okay.
So we put in a minimal amount of budget for the middle schools, $1,500 per school in case we need some additional supplies. But as Dr. Fieser said in her letter, we've been very blessed in the past few years with support from the Board of Education and from the city in terms of our budgets, and we have an excellent technology in all of our schools. So we feel that we're able to address this career pathway with minimal impact on the budget.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The other thing I would add, go ahead, Jessica.
I forgot to add when I was explaining our timeline of the development. So over the past 2 years, Lisa and I have applied for grants to support the development of this pathway. I should have mentioned this earlier. So we were awarded a Perkins Innovation Grant last year for this school year to work on the development of the pathway, so that some of the costs are absorbed by that. And we also were awarded participation in a math science partnership grant to support training for teachers to teach computer science. So that's where offsetting some of the costs to grants.
Okay.
So you had actually already reported to us on the Carl Perkins grant, at least. You did a presentation
On the innovation grant.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, well, thank you. Those are both excellent answers. And
The only thing, third thing that I would add, which was something that we were surprised by, sometimes what happens is that certification gets in the way, and so we may have staff on board, but they're not certified in have the correct certification to teach something. What we learned is that in computer science, there is no specific certification for computer science. So what we realized was, wow, we have much, much more flexibility in as far as teachers who might go in. You know, we could have a teacher who may not know computer science, but can be trained, and we have grant monies to be able to train someone. And we're not hampered by the fact that they don't have a particular certification.
Okay, so we won't tell anyone that, right?
That's why, you know, when we started to look at staffing, you know, we just said, we know we're going to be able to find it with the existing ranks of our staff.
Okay.
And that was just a huge kind of burden that was lifted off of us, not to have that constraint, because it can be really problematic at times.
Okay, thank you.
So if I could, what I'm hearing regarding the middle school piece is that it's a mini course, so it's not a full-blown course, it's a...
Again, we're in developing that right now because we are really looking at the schedule.
And the students already have some exploratory courses that are built into their schedule. So you mentioned some of the ones, you know, your prior district, they had to do all of them, but we have some of that.
Correct.
So would this take the place for some students of those options potentially? So we're not really taking away from any of their instructional, their core teaching, correct?
As I said before, realistically, we're looking at the schedule right now.
Okay.
In terms of core academic instruction, that is a priority always, and that we would address that first and foremost. And then we obviously want to have students have multiple experiences across disciplines, not just in core areas, because it is important for their development. And in cases in our tech ed class now in the middle school, we have the robotics piece to it, as well as they were exposed to the hour of code. So there are elements of this already in place. How it looks next year is going to be contingent upon how we develop the actual schedule.
Okay, thank you. Other questions on this, Mrs. Casey?
Just a comment, I think computer science is absolutely the direction that we should be going in. For kids to be interested and motivated and engaged, I think is, you know, half the battle in high school. So thank you very much for that, really. It's going to be a great program.
Actually, the CABE, worked at the CABE conference 2 years ago. I attended one of the workshops I attended, spoke to pathways. And so you gave us some statistics for Connecticut on computer programmers. Well, nationally and worldwide, we're talking hundreds of thousands of positions and only a fraction right now of qualified people to fill those jobs. So
yeah, it was somewhere in the 100,000s, and it was in, I think, the 60,000 range about how many graduates there were nationally last year, and then how many, I mean, it was, the gap.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah, I found it amazing, so. Dr. Gregory, I'm sorry.
There was just one other opportunity. I don't know if you guys have been in connection with the Computer Educators of Connecticut Association, the CECA, because they do teacher-based awards for developing these sorts of things. And they also invite teachers to present what they're doing with students in the lines of computers and computer education.
Yeah, one of our teachers has been involved, has done presentations, and I believe she won an award too. Rachel Martin at Sheffield. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we're ready to move on? Yes.
Okay. My other concern is that we've been doing a lot of things that are intended to improve the academic performance of the schools. But I don't believe that we're seeing the results that we should be from those activities. And one of the things that I believe is happening is that we're really trying to do too many things. That we're not taking the time when we have an initiative to fully exploit the benefits that could give us. And so when you talk about now taking a look at the middle schools and electives, you know, I'm thinking this is just going to add more turmoil to a system that has too much change already.
So just, if I may, Mr. Jagodinski, one, you know, I would concur that we certainly, our students are more capable than what our scores reflect, and I'd be the first to say that. And what I would also say to you is there has been an enormous amount going on within the system, some of which we had no choice over.
I understand.
You know, but I think that's important. So simultaneously, you know, Common Core came on board, teacher evaluation came on board, new administrator evaluation came on board, the new testing came up, all just, you know, even though many of us said time out, can we stagger the implementation, and it was just no.
Right.
So you're right, there's just been a tremendous amount, and that's part of the reason why, even in this budget this year, we just kind of said, we just need to kind of pause.
Right.
You know, and so, you know, I wouldn't disagree with what
Right.
you're saying, absolutely. Yeah. But what I would say to you is that the scores are not where I would love to see them be, but we are able to point to indicators where I think the school system has really strengthened. And with respect to the middle school, there's no desire to turn the middle school upside down. But let me give you an example. I have a parent advisory, it's all the presidents
Right.
of the PTOs, and I meet with them once a month, so I met with them last week, really around the budget. And when I talked with them about the pathway, one of the first questions that was asked by a parent is, so at the middle school, are you going to take something out? Meaning in the unified arts, which is, you know, your tech ed, and et cetera, or are you going to shorten the pieces that are there? You know, or are kids going to have choice? I mean, and it was a very logical question, and I just simply said, you know, we haven't decided that. And really part of that decision is what's best for kids.
Right.
You know, so that's part of the reason why we haven't yet made that decision, because we want to think about how best to service kids, knowing that maybe not every student, you know, needs to be in this right this minute.
Right.
So how do we do it without turning everything upside down? And we're really cognizant of that,
Right.
you know. And
yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, I can see in the initiatives and the, you know, from the past and now, and you know, what I'm encouraging is that, you know, we slow down even more. At this point, coming up with new ideas is the last thing we need to do. That's just my opinion, but I you know, I think that's where we are at this point.
If I may make one correction, we're not just looking at electives, we're looking at the entire schedule.
Right.
And there'll be a series of priorities of what that schedule should address first, and obviously the main priorities will be academic instruction in the core areas.
Right.
So that's the focus. Obviously, when we're taking an entire redesign of the middle school schedule, could be minor, could be major, that, you know, we want to ensure that we're looking at all facets of that redesign. But I want to assure you that we're looking at the core academic instruction and holding that sacrosanct in this case to hold on to this. The second point I do want to make, however, is that that I think we need to move our understanding of education and instruction away from silos. In other words, away from here's English, here's social studies, here's math. That in this case, many of these courses, you know, you can imagine, I would, you know, suggest that you go on an hour of code, hourofcode.org and try to get into how to design an app or design a little program. It's quite incredible. My 10-year-old did it a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of logical thinking there. It's going to be mathematical thinking, it's just going to be general logical thinking. So these courses will enhance instruction in reading. And if you recall from my presentation on Monday night for the SAT, you notice that some of the questions, it's no longer isolated to obscure vocabulary words. That there's an acknowledgement across the country that instruction and assessments have to go cross-curricular, if you will, interdisciplinary. So these courses, when we look at them, really do enhance the core area instruction.
Mr. Whiskeyman?
Just on a general philosophical basis, in my opinion, I think that the world is changing ever so much more rapidly, and that we need to accelerate our educational efforts to position ourselves in a manner that takes advantage of those opportunities that are presented to us, such as the new development of a new program such as this, while at the same time maintaining a balance between all the various different activities, including academics, sports, extracurricular activities, which develop a well-rounded individual. So I would not want to see us slow down or stop our forward momentum or development. But rather I would encourage the acceleration of these efforts and the continued work that you're doing to make sure that we do implement programs which enhance the opportunities for our children.
Okay. Mrs. Glennon?
Yes?
I would like to suggest that in the future we have a presentation on the science pathway, the computer science pathway, because I think there are a lot of issues here that the board should discuss. And I don't think we have the time
No, well,
to do
the
that.
budget process is not the time
Right.
to bring that up. But I do want to point out that this was I appreciate your reservations, but this was a directive of the board, directing administration to develop actually 2 pathways for 2016-17. And I'm glad that, Dr. Fuser has acknowledged that they're only going to get 1 in.
Right.
I think that's wise. And that this is really, I'm hearing that we already have, a lot of these pieces already exist in the school district, so we're not really developing a lot. It's, it's already in place. But it's their choice what pathway they want to put in place. It's our responsibility to address it through the budget. So, they're gonna, I'm sure we'll get updates as they go along, but it's their choice to develop this program. That's what they were directed to do. They were directed to develop a college and career pathway program by the board. And that's what they've done. So
what the board approved was a vague idea. And for us to base our decisions based on vague, meaningless ideas is quite frankly irresponsible.
That's your opinion, and this isn't the time to really discuss that philosophical.
I'm
telling you that the board directed them to do this. They were given the directive to do this, and they've done it.
Like I don't know that? I know that.
Okay.
Yeah. All I ask is, I think this is a significant issue. I think that there are significant questions, and I think the board ought to hear a formal presentation and ought to fully discuss it.
Okay, we'll take that under advisement. Thank you. All right, are we ready to move on to the next question? Number 7.
So we're on number 7. How much better are West Shore students scoring in language as compared to East Shore and Harborside? And to be perfectly honest with you, that's not data now this is obviously tied to the use of the computer lab, and to be honest with you, we don't have that kind of data. The computer lab that is in existence at West Shore, literally this is the 2nd year of the lab. And so we don't have that. But what I did share was information that was provided to me by Dr. Barbero, who is the supervisor of social studies and world language. And what he indicated is what the lab itself is enabling teachers and students to do in the learning of the language. And the fact that there are these labs now in existence at the high school, what it's doing for middle school, what it will do potentially for middle school students is as they move up through the language 7th grade and 8th grade and into the high school, they'll already have an experience of working with this lab, and so then as they move into the 3rd year of a language or the 4th year if they were to continue, or 5th year, this is common, this would be common to them. What he also explained is that, and I know this is only for a certain percentage of kids, but advanced placement now is requiring that their exam is taken on in this kind of a lab. It's cannot be taken pencil and paper or online. It's to be done in this kind of a lab. So so it doesn't answer the specific question about comparison of scores. But in the short time that it's in, both teachers and students are really engaging in learning that they were not able to do without the lab. That's what I can tell you.
Mrs. Glennon?
Yes, Mr. Jagodzinski.
This gets back to the issue, are we fully exploiting the tools that we have? It seems to me that the language lab can improve our languages substantially if we're using them properly, if we're exploiting its full potential. But we have no way of knowing if, in fact, we're doing that.
But it's only the 2nd year, and what I would say to you is, so for example, in the middle school, students can earn high school credit in a language. How they earn that credit is at the end of 8th grade, they basically take the assessment that the high school kids, that would be given in the high school in that level of language. So the lab was put in last year with, so, the first kind of cohort of kids moving through for 2
Right.
years is in one school, and it's the end of this year. So it's not that I'm avoiding the question, it's just, it's so early with the use of this one lab in the middle school.
But this would give us an opportunity to compare a school with the lab and a school without the lab.
Correct.
And are we putting in place a methodology so that we can do that comparison and we can in fact demonstrate that this equipment is improving language capabilities?
So I think we can demonstrate language capabilities, but to demonstrate, is it making a difference in student performance as compared to the other 3 schools? We're just not there ready yet to be able to do that because it's so new.
Okay.
It is what I would say to you. And it's not a cop-out, it's just.
No,
that,
I
you know,
understand.
But it's a very legitimate question, there's no 2 ways about it. And in my mind, and we certainly will give further thought to it, but the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, let's look at the kids who are going for credit, and are we seeing that there maybe perhaps is either a higher percentage of
Right.
kids or kids are scoring higher on this measure which all students are taking?
Right, exactly, that's,
You know, and so
Right.
it's a legitimate question,
Mhm.
but we just don't have that data right now.
Yeah, that's the only kind of things I'm looking for. You know, when we do something, you know, how do we know it's really successful? That's really what I'm getting
Right,
at.
and I was able to share that what they saw at the high school is that they saw a significant increase
Right.
in the performance. Now, these were kids in the AP Spanish.
Right.
But they saw it immediately from the year before.
Right.
But they had a year before.
Right.
See, that's part of the issue with respect to the middle school, you know.
Right,
So-
okay.
Dr. Gregory and then Ms. Federico.
So I trust that the professional educators using this are doing it with fidelity. I don't have issue with that. I don't have any interest in comparing one school to another school. I don't think that's going to move us forward. It's also really difficult statistically to do well because you have to control for all the other effects that are involved. So I think we get misleading information that way. I would be interested to know what Dr. Barbero or anybody else's plan is to sort of monitor the implementation in ways that are more appropriate, where we're using those data to make good decisions. But I'm concerned about this idea about comparing schools. Maybe one school has something that another school doesn't, but that doesn't mean you have the same students, the same children, the same teachers in those schools. And so I'd be really nervous about starting to go down that road.
Okay, Ms. Federico?
I would just like to add, I agree with Dr. Gregory about comparing schools. And, you know, I also believe that there are some times where we have to trust the educators and we have to take their word for what they're telling us. You know, it could take 2 to 3 years before you see a difference in test scores. And, you know, I don't think in the interest of equity, I don't think it's fair that the other middle schools should have to wait to get a language lab when we have a model that the educators are telling us is working. I don't think they should have to wait until we see a test score, which may or may not ever prove that out. Not everything is about test scores. We have to rely on your judgment and your feedback.
Any other questions or comment on this question? No, we can move on then.
So the next question has to do with the social emotional curriculum, and there was another question that came in. Mr. Burt, do you want to address this?
Sure. So for question number 8, the question asked about the cost. And again, we've made an overall reduction to the line item for curriculum writing. These monies are just earmarked within that fund. So these are not additional funds. We just take a look at what we're asking for, and then we allot the monies within there. If you turn to question number 43, the question was, can you please give examples of what types of classes and coursework this would encompass? And I'm not going to read through the answer. You can do that on your own, but I just will give you an overview. We know from teachers, from parents, from administrators, that this element of a child's education is significant to ensure that a child has the skills to come into a classroom, to self-regulate, to have the social skills to work with others, the executive functioning skills, in other words, that they're able to know how to regulate themselves. That is crucial to having a student be safe and in our schools. When a student feels welcome, feels safe, they feel like they're under control within our schools, we know that their ability to access instruction is increased. That when a student has problems, has issues, is not able to work with their peers, that we know that has a significant impact on their achievement, on their learning. It leads to further disciplinary issues. We know it leads to attendance issues. So this element is crucial. We do not currently have a coordinated program pre-K through 12. And so part of these funds, and again, it's not a significant fund if we look at the overall spending and curriculum over the past 4 years, that these funds are really to take a look at our existing programs and begin the process of developing these programs to ensure that we're creating equity across all of our schools. Take a look at, is there an alignment pre-K through 12? Is there an alignment across all of our buildings? And that we're addressing these needs. Are there things that are happening in our schools that are addressing this? Absolutely. We have teachers, we have administrators that really are focusing on this and doing their best. But what we really need is a coordinated effort to ensure that we are addressing all the needs across the board. We know that, and just anecdotally more than anything, that we have students coming in with greater needs into our systems, and that in some cases they're perhaps not learning these things at home, and that we do have to, in some cases, instruct students in some basic things on how to work in a group, how to self-regulate. So it's important that we have this curriculum in place, and one of the pieces when I take curriculum, I want to put it in quotes because it's not a course. We're not going to go into reading in 3rd grade, then writing in 3rd grade, then social emotional learning in 3rd grade. It's going to be embedded in our practices. The one area that may be an actual part of a course will be in health instruction in middle and high schools. For instance, bullying is part of that. That would be a social emotional piece. There's other elements to it as well that are part of that curriculum. But for the most part, across areas, specifically pre-K through 5th grade, this is going to be part of that regular education, taking a look at our current practices and making sure that we're addressing that through our regular education. In the high school and the middle school, we have things like advisories, we have guidance programs, and again, these things are in place currently. It's just making sure that they're aligned with best practices and that they're vertically and horizontally aligned.
Mrs. Casey?
Just a comment about this program. I know we're in the research phase, but I think it's such an important component in our schools. Our kids' emotional well-being is just as important as their academic success. So our students coming to school, varying backgrounds and experiences, and this will, and I know our teachers are doing their best to enable them to have a positive and enriching school experience, but you never know what kids are coming to school with. So they may be struggling with things in their life. So with this program being put into place, I think, that we will build on that foundation, which is when we're educating our children, the whole child is really being considered. So it's crucial and important, and I think it's a great addition.
Thank you, Mrs. Casey. Ms. Federico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Mrs. Casey. I think this is an excellent thing to be focused on. And it sounds to me like a lot of the components are already there. This is a way to give a name to those things that you're already doing and pull it all together and make it more coordinated as they go through K through 12. And I think that's excellent. If I may, I'd like to offer some advice. I don't know if you've already looked into this in the school system at all, but if you haven't already, take a look at the Jessie Lewis Choose Love Foundation. It sounds like it could be a good fit here. Jessie Lewis was one of the children who was killed in Newtown in December 2012, and his mom, Scarlett Lewis, started this foundation, and it's based on the principles of nurturing, healing, love, and it's just about kindness and being good to one another. And I think it may fit in very well with what you're talking about here. I could offer that advice. Thank you.
Mr. Wiskiman?
Within this, I presume you have components for teacher development so that they recognize the various different signs of lack of social development and can take the appropriate action for intervention and to bring in any specialists when it's indicated within this context. So that's built into this program.
Absolutely, that is going to be part of our professional development. But again, identifying where are the best practices within the district instead of trying to going out and just reinventing the wheel. Where are we doing things well? And it could be one teacher in one building that has a really good handle on this, and then utilizing their skills to help others learn. But that's really going to be an evolving practice over the next 2 to 3 years to really get this system in place and fully implemented.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions on this? We can move on.
Next question is there any research that indicates that SROs in fact make schools safer? So we provided some research here from the National Association of School Resource Officers, which on a national level a significant amount of research has been done about the impact of SROs. We don't have the same kind of data that's articulated here. But if you, in question 10, we suggested, I think it was question 10.
Question 11. I think you're going to the question 11.
Question 11, excuse me. We referenced a link to the presentation that our own Milford Police Department made to the Board of Ed in just this past August. And in there was survey data, surveys of parents around what they felt the impact of the SROs were, and it was overwhelmingly positive on the part of parents and the impact on their kids and the school climate, et cetera. What I can say to you is that Jeff Nielsen is here, who is our now safety coordinator, but had been in the Milford Police Department, and really was a liaison to the schools and communication person and head of the crime division, et cetera. And I don't know, Mr. Nielsen, if you would want to say anything about the SROs. I know you were behind some of the presentation piece that was made this summer.
I just think that just looking, coming from that side to here and using Board of Ed lenses, so to speak, I see value in it for even more. Consistency. If you look, the police department has 116 officers. If you would take a different officer to go to a school every day and deal with an incident, they need to become familiar with the students, the staff, and our goals and objectives for the Board of Ed here. Having those SROs in the schools, they provide that consistency, they provide that parallel mission that we have here to make schools safer. So I think it's definitely a worthwhile program. Adding an SRO would be additional coverage in the schools would be great. As Dr. Fieser referenced before, the testimonials that the SRO presentation in August provided, it shows that parents feel safer, kids feel safer, staff feel safer. So if you look at that, I think we're accomplishing what we need to do with their assistance, and it's definitely beneficial.
My recollection from the presentation was that there was some data that addressed a decrease in referrals and things of that nature as well, that there were fewer kids being sent to the office, so to speak. I think that was in that presentation.
I think there was. I think that there was also a significant amount of data on how many times, if you want to talk about interventions, that the SROs, in other words, how many interactions they had with students, how many meetings they had with groups of kids, et cetera. Conflict resolutions that were handled by them, which was really, really significant.
My recollection from the original SRO presentation that we had probably 4 years ago was that the middle school component was, in the expert who spoke with us, the middle school component was the key component in their opinion in terms of having an SRO in the middle schools, because that's when you get a lot of the male-female stuff going on, and the dating and the bullying and all that. I remember them talking about that.
But the national data, correct me if I'm wrong, the national data around violence in the schools, most people think it's the high schools. It's more the middle schools. Bullying, it's more the middle schools. Part of that is the age. So obviously, we have great staffs, but to have the SRO there is just a real bonus. So.
Questions, Ms. Federico?
Madam Chair, I just would like to state my own opinion on this in terms of adding an SRO to a middle school. So, you know, we talked, the board, last year's board talked a lot about the SRO program, and while I understand, you know, no safety measure that we can put in place is going to be 100% foolproof. SROs particularly are not armed security guards standing at the door. I understand they're in the school. But when you mention things like conflict resolution, you know, and we have an SRO today that's split between two middle schools. I would hate to be having a conversation somewhere down the road that after there's an incident that takes place at one of those middle schools on the day when the SRO is at the other middle school. I would much rather be having this conversation now and have the opportunity to add that SRO to the budget. And I understand somebody's still going to have to spend 20% of their time at the academy, but still, however that shakes out, that's better to me than 50-50. So I think that it's really important that we make sure all the middle schools are covered.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. DeGrego.
Madam Chair, through you, I want to remind the board, I think it was back in September when the captain was here with the SROs, Officer Mills, Officer Taylor, Officer Del Monte, and Officer Kiley. Not only did Milford Police Department come in and set up with Dr. Fieser and the administration how to do the SRO program, but I don't know if I can get some help from Mr. Nielsen here. We received, well, the Milford Police Department was given was ranked #1 in the state of Connecticut for the way they developed the SRO program. Do you remember that, Mr. Nielsen?
Yes,
They were given that distinction.
So it was actually a national award.
It was a national award. Milford Police Department is second to none in this state with the SRO program. And I think that's a good idea. I just laud the police department for what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeGrego. Any other questions on the SRO or comments? Yes,
I'd just like to
Mr.
add to that too, that bear in mind, that was a national award. There were 150 departments nationwide. That was within the first year of the program. You know, that was in the program's infancy. And it's just grown so much in such a short time period. That's a great accomplishment.
Thank you. I guess
So number 12, at the end of the school year, there has always been a budget surplus that is either returned to the city or earmarked for spending. Please provide the amounts for the last 5 years. So in your appendices, which this would be Exhibit 3, there's actually a number of exhibits here for this particular question, and if you have detailed questions, Mr. Bradbury probably could help with some of this. But what you have in the exhibit, first of all, are the surplus monies from the last 5 years that were transferred from other accounts to enable this kind of money to be used then. Quite frankly, most of it was used for building projects. Because that's been the custom here in Milford for years and years and years and years, but long before I came on board. So what you see in this exhibit, for example, 2010, 2011, that $96,000 coming out of particular accounts went into that, and that money would have been used for buildings, grounds, and projects. And what we do is that every year in May, we write to the Board of Ed and say, these are the projects that we would like to do, and we would like to use the surplus money, most of it, for that purpose. And when I say most of it, there may be some transfers to cover shortages. Like we know we're going to have to make some transfers this year to cover the shortage in natural gas. We already know that. So here's the 5 years, and what we explained is also what is a non-lapsing account. It used to be, prior to, I think it was 2010, that the state changed the law. that it used to be that you could not carry any money over whatsoever in your budget. You know, you could encumber, which was the question you asked the other night, Mr. Jagoditsky, but you could not carry any money over. And there was just such enormous frustration on districts across the state because there were times in years where you couldn't spend it all, particularly some of the districts that received like huge grants that came in where you have a time span in which to spend that grant, and so you didn't get to spend other monies that you maybe had. And so finally the law was changed that allows, and it's explained here, I think it's 1% of your budget to be able to put into what's called a non-lapsing account. The approval for that, interestingly enough, has to come from the Board of Finance, not the Board of Aldermen. It goes to the Board of Finance. So the very first time that we did this was when we had this huge surplus in 2011, 2012. And so we asked, could we put $450,000 in that specifically earmarked for, to do the fields at both high schools, redo the surfaces of the fields. And knowing that this was going to have to go out to bond, it was going to have to be done, so why not take a large percentage of money and put it into that non-lapsing account? The Board of Finance approved it. And then the second time that we did that was in 2013-14. We took $300,000 that was left over and said, could we put it in a non-lapsing account and earmark it for moving expenses tied to the elementary reconfiguration? And that's exactly what the monies was used for. So, and then, as I said, there's the exhibits, has the letters, all the letters, I think, for the last, those 5 years, with the list of building projects, and then you also see from the maintenance department what the actual summer projects were. So what I will say to you in answer to this question, the surplus, if there is a surplus, that's what's enabled us to do so much of the building, keeping our buildings maintained as well as they have been maintained, because there isn't enough money in the budgets that we bring forward. And so to do everything, so the idea is if there's surplus, could we redirect it? And Mr. Bradbury, would you want to speak any more to that?
Normally, every year when we do the budget, prior to it coming here, there's usually about $2 million in building and grounds projects that we can come up with. If you give me $1 million tomorrow, I'll spend it. The money, the buildings need a lot of attention. They will constantly need attention. And some of the work that I do is if I can get ahead of a project such as West Shore Middle School, I've already done all the abatement there. So that won't get tied into the capital money, which kind of helps West Shore Middle School because we can put more into the bricks and mortar there. But we couldn't we're not going to get ahead with the budget money that we give through this budget process. We're down to $150,000 in building projects. It's just not enough, But we really can make some strides. We've made tremendous strides just in these few years that we've done. It's a huge help, We wouldn't be in the position we are right now without this money. There's no way. With the vehicle replacement, some of the roof work that we've done, the parking lots, it's been a ton. It's been a huge help for us to get moving forward.
And also just keeping up with general upkeep, all the painting that's done every year. How many classrooms have to be painted, corridors that have to be painted, tile that has to be replaced.
All of that.
So I don't know if that answers.
Mr. Jagodzinski, yes.
Yep. Let me see if I understand. In the year 14-15, the $740,000, where did that go? Just briefly, I don't need details. Did that go for projects?
So if we look at, that was in 14-15, if we look at 14, let's see, which, in the 14-15 year, glasses on here, which would be,
yeah, so it went to,
you can see it's broken out here. It's actually the last set of documents.
Right.
So you see at all schools what was done, and then you see Cafe Meadow, John F. Kennedy, and there's the column that says total, which is the money we spent. So for example, if you look at all schools, the total we spent,
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bradbury, is $177,758. But then what added to that was from the CIP, which is the capital improvement plan from the city, another $440,000. So for overall projects, those were $618,000. But then you see, in addition, then, okay, let's look at what happened at Cap 10, at John F. Kennedy, et cetera. And this is what was spent from monies that came in, that was in the surplus. Are you with me, Mr. Bradbury?
I'm trying to get it down.
It's the, if you look at the fourth last page in the exhibit,
Exhibit 4.
and it says exhibit 5 on the top.
Okay. Yes, all these projects, yes. I'm with you now. But,
So if we could
Right.
just clarify in this document, the all schools, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, the all schools is just general projects, right? And then each school specific project is listed after that?
correct.
So the grand total is on the last page?
The last page.
6 of 6?
Correct, which is Board of Ed project along with City CLP project.
So Board of Ed, $1,190,584,000?
And there's money in there that is budgeted.
So the $774,000 went towards that money? That's my understanding.
That we did an OD parking lot, moving expenses. This just doesn't split up what we have. It just comes out of the budget. Can't tell by this list what was actually added in surplus money for this list because it just has the year it came out.
So might this be,
And there's different years here.
might this
Correct,
be one
there
to
are some of
carry
the
over?
projects we don't, some of the projects I do not get done in that.
Correct.
in that
We talked about that.
year. And the PO
All right.
is, we finished it up in the fall, the summer after, because we can't approve the money and get it done in that window, that 7-week window that I have.
For the purposes of our discussion, though, I think, knowing there was a $700,000 surplus and we spent it on projects is sufficient.
So what we can do is, I'll be glad to ask Jim Riccitelli, because he'll be here tomorrow, and he can then, either confirm or say, here's the percentage that actually goes to buildings and grounds. Because again, that money in July, June and July, he brings forward the budget transfers.
Yeah.
Where's the money going?
Personally, just for me, I'm not interested in where it went.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just interested that we had a surplus and we spent it.
Yep.
And my concern is to have a $700,000 surplus is very large. If I was on the Board of Finance or I was on the Board of Aldermen,
Sure.
I would look at that and I would say, cut. And the biggest variable that we have is retirements. That's the impression I have. Is that true?
It's one of them, so for example, 2 years ago,
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong in my years, 2 years ago, we had 28 retirements, which was way higher than the average,
Right.
like 10 more than the average. And then the following year, we had fewer than 15, if my memory was like 8, so it was just this, well, that wreaks havoc on your budget then.
Right.
And so can you explain that, wasn't that the reason why we had that high 700,000?
Correct. Then we also had a tremendous amount of attrition. Wendy can speak to how many teachers she hired over the summer. I think it was the largest number.
Yeah, it was the largest number since I've been here.
Yeah, correct. Also unpaid leaves contribute to that. People who take maternity leaves or
Mhm.
unpaid leaves contribute to that as well.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we couldn't use a portion of future surpluses for a fund to cover unexpected retirements. This is probably a question for Jim, but that would allow us to budget more precisely, and we wouldn't wind up with these huge surpluses, every couple of years. Because like I say, I think this is risky from, a process point of view. I think, if either the Board of Finance or Alderman looked at that, they could have serious questions in that area.
There's a pretty big explanation down here as to what contributed to those
Yeah,
two.
right.
And Ms. Federico?
Yeah, Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to add a comment. For me, coming from the corporate finance world, you know, I had to get used to this type of budgeting. In a corporation's budget, you know, you set your target, you can come in under or over, you try to get as close as possible. But here, we can't come in over. You know, there's a state law, it comes out of our budget if we come in over. So we have to budget an appropriate amount, and we have to leave a little bit of a cushion. And I think that's the responsible thing to do. And on a $91 million budget, you know, a $700,000 surplus is less than 1%. And I think that that's reasonable. You know, I think it's good that this money is spent. Sure, I'd like to see us coming closer. But I personally, I'm not concerned about it because we have to come in under and we have to be careful.
And look how close we did come in some years.
Some years,
90,
yeah.
Less than $100,000.
And there's so many unknowns and unexpected variables that go into this, especially doing the budget so early. There's just so many things that you don't know about that can happen.
Mr. Wiskinen?
Also, perhaps for Mr. Riccitelli, the 14-15 year resulted in a surplus, but this year we had the fewer retirements last year, so this year is being impacted by that, and I think we're facing some really tight numbers this year, partly as a result of that, but he could confirm whether or not, because that swung back and forth. So I don't think we're going to have these kind of surpluses this year, but he could confirm those numbers and see what we're going to end up with, because I think it could be pretty tight this year, just because of this swing back and forth. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to, yeah, don't go get too nervous about the idea. Don't expect big surpluses this year.
Other questions on this or comment on this question? We can move on to 13.
About 10.
10 we already did.
No, we didn't.
You did?
Well, it was done within the context of the SRO conversation. Just want to go back to, we didn't.
I don't feel that that was
Okay.
necessarily.
All right, can we go back to question 10?
Sure. So, if I understood the question correctly, is that it's suggesting that we won't really have an SRO 100% of the time in each of the middle schools. And that's correct, if the model remains as is, and that's something that would be worked out with the police department. So if we got an extra SRO, would we continue taking a middle school SRO to spend a portion of time during the week with the academy? Or would there be a different way? And would it be that it would be the same SRO coming out of one building, or would there be a sharing of the SROs? So that's still to be determined. But somewhere, but the answer is that whether it's, and I presume it would be the middle school, not the high school, that would be impacted. You know, would there be a school or schools that might not have literally 100%? Yes, because you have this fifth school with our sixth school, I should say, which is the academy, but you would only have 5 SROs.
Right, it was just in the presentation, in the many beautifully written pages, it suggested that it would get full coverage at the middle schools. And so I just was wondering if there was a 2/10 of a police officer that was actually going to be added in there to float around.
Right. And that was my error in terms of how I framed it. It was more the idea of that Harborside and East Shore then would have full-time. Okay, thank you. We're on question 13. Is there if there is a great need over at Pumpkin, why have a half-day pre-K program? Mr. Burt, do you want to speak to the merits of, since you, I know, have had direct experience with this?
Of course. The question centers on why not advocate for a full-day program, and you know, that would be ideal in many cases, primarily because then it provides a consistent day for families that are in need, that then they get the additional piece of having to be able to drop their child off earlier in the morning and pick them up later in the afternoon. Maybe it creates issues with childcare at home, those types of pieces. So in considering this, we wanted to be fiscally prudent as well as acknowledge the limited space over at Pumpkin. We can identify one classroom that we can use for this, and in looking at that, we said, what can we do with the greatest impact on our students of greatest need? And so we determined that a half-day program would meet the, what we're calling academic and social needs of students in the area with the greatest need, while still being, fitting within those guidelines I discussed earlier. Just to give you some sense, in my previous district, we had a school that had significant need, and we put a half-day program in there and really focused in on early literacy skills, early numeracy skills, as well as early social skills, and just getting kids ready to do school. And this was our school, and I was in a community that had significant achievement gap between school in a wealthier section, and this was in a needier section. And with this, we saw a significant impact on kindergarten the next year. So we know that there's research out there. I've been doing some reading over the past couple weeks into pre-K, and the research, what does it tell us? And it, unfortunately, it really depends upon the political nature of that research, but what I can find is that there is, for children in need, that there is a significant impact on their instruction. And I can just say anecdotally from my experience that in this particular area that it does help, because we know that certain students that don't get the pre-K experience through private funds, through their families, are able to provide that or provide some sort of organized childhood experience prior to coming to kindergarten, that there is a lapse, that there is problems when they enter into the school, that they don't understand the fact in some cases that you're not supposed to run down the hallway, that you are supposed to walk down the hallway, something simple as that. So we are advocating that we think that this will have an impact on that particular population.
Questions? Mr. Wiskiman?
I know we have several different programs. You may have presented this before, but is there like a single sheet presentation that shows all the different programs, where they're located, and what populations they cover, and what issues they address, so that we can kind of have a comprehensive picture of the total pre-K efforts being made in the district, because I know we've moved some around, and it's not quite the same as it was the prior year, so that might help get a sense of the total coverage that we have.
We can have that ready for tomorrow night.
That would be good. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions on this, comments or questions on this question? Yes, Dr. Gregory.
If enrollment trends continue, would it be considered to then adopt a full day rather than a half day to meet sort of the parent side, the family side of that?
Long-term, you mean?
Yeah, long-term.
It's a good question. I think that, some of it is the financial piece. Right. Obviously, if the enrollment were to decline so much that we only had the need for one, and we're not sure, if and when that may happen, at say, for example, Pumpkin. So, but it's certainly something that could be looked at. But we were looking at, knowing that Pumpkin has the neediest population in the district, what might we be able to implement that might really immediately start to make a difference with respect to kids?
Anything else?
The next question had to do with a book title, and this is a children's book which was published in 1998, and from what I understand was a part of a series that, not a series in the sense of the same author, but a group of books that were really used in kindergarten for early reading, and apparently there was the thought that we might be paying $166 for this book, which is has 55 words in it, and it's 16 pages in length. From what I haven't seen the book, but I read it. I did quite a bit of reading about this. When all is said and done, the book is not in print, and if you know anything about books that are not in print, when they're desirable, the price is elevated significantly. And I knew when I went online and immediately saw paperbacks were $20, and then the hard copy was $166. My immediate thought was, this has got to be out of print. Well, it is out of print. So the long and the short of it is that we don't, when a book goes out of print, neither in the libraries nor in terms of our language arts programs do we pay the money to purchase out-of-print books. What we do is we find something that's comparable in terms of why we use this book in the first place, from a literary point of view, or maybe the message that's being delivered in the book, etc. So this book, if a teacher has it, it may be part of her own collection, which we know that there are teachers that have phenomenal collections in terms of books. Or, quite frankly, maybe it may be a book that is part of a collection that was in the school system from years ago, you know. So, that's what we found out.
Okay. So, do you have a rough idea of what those kinds of books do cost us?
Do I? No, but we can get that answer.
Okay.
And I know that anybody who's in literacy in the library people, they try to get them for the cheapest possible, you know, you know, but we can find out.
Okay, yeah, my concern, I mean, sometimes educational textbooks and things like that have extraordinary prices. I was wondering if we have that kind of situation here.
So, for instance, part of the reconfiguration, we purchased a number of books for our elementary classrooms, and there is a class set of books, and we typically get a bulk discount, especially for ordering for 10, 12 classrooms.
Right.
We're able to purchase with a couple of our vendors, you know, at a bulk discount, and we also don't pay taxes on it as well. So there's a class list typically generated by our instructional supervisors, that these are the resources that are minimum for each classroom, and that's constantly updated by our staff to ensure that we're getting the best price as well as the most updated book. If a book is no longer in print, or it falls off, or if it's, you know, our instructional supervisors deem that it's no longer appropriate, then we make sure that that goes off. Obviously, you know, if something came across our desk that was $166, we say, whoa, you know, we're not doing that.
But we can bring in some samples, like get some samples of what they may cost, you know. I would also say that we have a person, Deb Dubian, in Mr. Bird's office, who purchases. And let me tell you, she is a guy. You guys know, you gotta get it by her, and you're gonna get it, and it's at the lowest price ever. She would just argue, and you hear her teachers are, that's not what I ordered. Well, we were able to get it cheaper, is basically it. So,
down to markers. 12 cents on markers, absolutely.
So now we're moving into. I'm sorry.
Just along that line. The books that might be considered part of consumables, like, you know, workbooks and things like that, that you use, and they're after 1 year or one semester they're gone.
Right.
In general, I think that's buried in here somewhere. The cost of the money we're spending for the consumables component of what might be considered book-like materials. As opposed, I don't know how you classify
so
those.
those go into the building, the
principal's
budget,
supplies,
doesn't it? Right, that's in the principal's.
Oh, okay, so that's a discretionary by building kind of.
Well, but they're told, you know, they would be given a memo that they would be told you're responsible for buying the consumable pieces for. Say, for example, math investigations, you know, or something else. That they're told that they have to include
workbooks and things like that.
Correct.
That are used, and I mean they're good for 1 year, and that's it.
Right. I'm remiss, by the way, in not introducing Terry Devaney. I really apologize. Terry is our business manager. Terry's the one that, boy, if you have a question about the detail, she's the one who, you know, who would really have that information, and has just been invaluable. And for preparing for tonight, if I hadn't had Terry today because Jim was gone, we would have been in serious trouble.
Ms. Federico, did you have a question?
I just wanted to add a comment, just a plug from my past experience with PTAs. I know the PTAs also run the book fairs in the schools, and as a result, Scholastic Books usually allows a certain amount of money that's based on how much is sold at the book fair, and the media teacher can go through her or his list of books that they need, and they get them out of that money. So it's another way that the
PTAs also donate books. So I was just asked to read on Friday at Orchard Hills and read the first chapter of a book that the whole school is reading. and it's Mr. Popper's Penguins. And the PTA literally bought the copy of the book for every child in the school, which is really, I mean, for some kids, that's huge. That's huge because they don't have books in their homes, you know. So and they do that in the elementary schools, which is just wonderful. It really is. Okay, so now we're moving into actually the accounts themselves. So we have a series of questions that are by account. So these are the 1000s. We're on question 15. Are the 2.0 ready-to-learn positions included as FTEs in the budget? This is for next year? No. They're not listed in the FTEs because in the budget, that's the Board of Education budget. So if a teacher is paid for in a fund other than the general fund, they will not be listed as FTEs. An example would be we have teachers who are paid through Title I monies. We have teachers that are paid through IDEA monies, which is your special education. So those FTEs, same way with paraprofessionals, would not be listed in the budget. The SROs, you know, the answer is there. We don't know whether it'll be included in the city's budget. If it's not included, then obviously it won't be funded. What will be the function of the 1.2 elementary school specialist? So I think there's some misunderstanding here. This isn't something that we're asking for. This was something that, these were positions or pieces of positions that were added to our current budget after the board adopted its budget. If you remember, there were 5.1 positions added after the board had adopted its budget. So these 1.2 elementary specialists, which were music and physical education teachers, they were added to meet the needs of all 8 elementary schools in light of the reconfiguration. So I don't know if that explains it sufficiently.
Further need for clarification?
No, I think you touched on it Monday night as well, so it was clear.
18, the section on staff reductions is fuzzy. Are we clear on that? I think, great, we're clear. 19, why is there an increase in media aids at the middle school? Actually, this was one of these situations where a position had been on Title I. It was moved off and placed in the general funds. So that's what it is. And then there's an increase in the somewhat a small amount in the dollar amount tied to that because the media aids actually now are working the same length of year as the teachers are, which is 181 school days, and then there's 4 days beyond that, and that's what the media aids work. 20 is a comment, so I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but so I'm going to leave that as is. What is the total dollar amount of contractual salary increases included in the budget? And these are broken down by category. Most of these are contractual, administration, teachers, maintenance, custodians, secretaries, paraprofessional. Actually, every one of these are contractual. So it's negotiated increases.
If I may comment, this is my question, and thank you for the information. And I just wanted to point out, I think this is a really critical piece of information in our budget. We're looking at a $776,000 increase. And of that increase, $741,000 is already specified by contractual obligations. So it's not something that we can move up or down. I don't want to say it's something that we can't control because we control it. We've controlled it through fiscally responsible negotiations. And the board has reviewed each of those negotiations, and we know that our negotiators have done a really good job. But I think for me, when we're looking at the $776,000 increase, I think one of the headlines should be $741,000 due to contractual obligations. And by the way, $311,000 due to benefits that's the amount from the summary. And we were able to offset a lot of that through savings. So I think this is a really, really crucial piece of information that when we get outside of this room, I think that's something that we should focus on. Everything else in the budget that we're talking about, it's important for us to talk about, but it's really a reallocation of funds. We're really shifting funds around, from one priority to another, and the Board of Education should be interested in discussing that, but this is the real driver for our increase. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Mr. Whiskeyman?
My question on these numbers, are these based upon actual salaries or the averages in terms of the calculations of how much these will be? In other words, are these based upon exactly the existing personnel, their salaries currently earned, and the expectation of their actual raises?
It's the actuals.
These are the actuals. Right. Okay, thank you.
Moving to the 3,000 account, the question on contracted services, why is there a $10,000 jump in the otherwise flat adult ed budget? We get a grant, which Mr. Riccitelli spoke about that the other night. We get a grant from the state annually for adult ed. It declined significantly this past year. Actually, it's been declining for the last several years. So what we did was we're requesting an additional $10,000 to offset that decline of the grant monies that supported the program. Moving forward, and under the 4,000 account facilities, what areas were used to cover the shortfall in this year's natural gas? And of course, this isn't finalized, but what we are anticipating, first of all, is that we know we're projecting that there's going to be a deficit of $94,000. And we are also projecting that there will be surpluses in electricity, water, and gasoline, which will be used to cover the shortage. But we won't know that till we move through the year, obviously. And then what will happen again for you as a board is those budget transfers, where is that money coming from to cover those costs? Those will be brought for you, and you actually have to approve those transfers.
We covered this a bit on Monday.
We went over the budget report.
Any questions on that?
So the printing piece, we requested the $10,000 based upon the historical average with respect to printing. And whoever raised this question, it's true that so much more is done digitally, but you'd be surprised the printing that still occurs. So for example, our the budget book will get printed formally. This is done by being formally printed. We have our course catalog and student handbook is online, but we do make a percentage of hard copies because there are families that request a hard copy or need a hard copy because they don't necessarily have access to their homes online. And there's other things that are printed. A year ago, if some of you saw this, when we had what we actually did it again this year, but the number of the students who are AP scholars, we created banners, for example, that were hung in our schools. That's a printing cost. That was something that we chose to do. So we could get you some other examples. It is something that we monitor. We're not excessive in the kind of printing that we do, but that was why the $10,000 was put in. Moving to the 6,000 educational supplies. So Mr. Burt, would you want to take just number 25 about the Reader's Workshop?
Of course, as you can see from the answer over the past 3 years, as this new program came in, as enhancing our instruction in reading at the elementary level, that we have, Ms. Jensen has done a good job of budgeting for this to ensure that we have rich classroom libraries that are available for our students. As part of the Reader's Workshop process, it's not a single book that all students are reading. Rather, it's trying to find books that are just right for the reading level or just a little bit above that to challenge them to ensure that they're getting the correct reading instruction. So we feel very confident that we have adequate resources for that program.
And will you also speak to the lack of parity in periodicals?
Sure. So we are moving forward trying to find parity between the three schools. And we are moving to more online digital presence for all 3 libraries as well as our high school libraries. But at this time, West Shore had some needs that were greater than the other 2 buildings. In addition, we did hire a new library media specialist there recently, and they're going to be taking a look at the program and working closely with our colleagues in the other 2 buildings to ensure that we have very similar programs in all 3 buildings.
Any additional question, comment or questions on those 2? Okay.
So page 27 has to do with the difference in the proposed expenses. The first one with respect to non-instructional supplies and the second graduation expenses. So just want to remind people that we give a per pupil, we use a per pupil formula for each of the levels of the schools, and that's in frequently asked question number 2 in your actual budget book. And that monies that is given, principals have the discretion to use that the way he or she chooses. And so that accounts for some of that variation in, particularly, for example, the non-instructional supplies. Mrs. Devaney, would there be anything else that would contribute to that? Okay. And then with respect to the graduation expenses, truthfully, I mean, you see that there's about $1,000 difference between the 2 schools, but there is some differences between the 2 schools in terms of graduation, even in terms of where it's located, you know, in terms of their grounds, how many police they may need or firemen, you know, so there's just going to be some differences in the cost. It's not an exact science. It also could be even in terms of the number of kids, you know, additional diplomas, additional programs that are being printed, etc. That could account for the differences in the costs. Under the 7,000s, equipment, if you'd like to know in greater detail what the 60,000 is slated for in central administration equipment. I know people are going to look at that saying, well, what is central office doing with $60,000? But the reality is this has to do with the generator. So the city received a state grant for a new generator at Law High School, which, if you know from the last 2 hurricanes, Law High School was the emergency shelter for people in the community. The city requested that we pay for the local share of the grant, which is $60,000.
So the city owes us $60,000. We're doing them a favor, is that the?
Well,
it sounds.
I hope you negotiated a good deal on this.
So there's a cost for there's a cost for the generator, and then minus the grant amount, and then there was you know, still $60,000 that had to be paid for the generator, and the city asked us to pay for that. That's basically what it boils down to.
Mr. Bradbury, do you want to add to that?
We just had a meeting on this, and there's a.
Can you speak up a little?
There's a bond that the city has gone after with the generator. They've already bonded the project, and our portion of the project is roughly $60,000. But that's what they want us to pay of that because we are going to have use of that generator. So if we have a generator there now, 100 kW generator that we're going to increase to either 200 or larger, and that'll give us a larger part of the building. It'll also help me because I'm going to try and get more of my heating on that also for the rest of the building. But it's really for the shelter purposes.
Mr. Hagedorn, you had a question?
I had a question on generators. It's probably hooked up to natural gas, correct?
That generator right now is a diesel generator.
Diesel generator?
And I believe that we're looking at both natural gas and a diesel generator.
Okay, and I had a question. Those start up automatically and cycle. Who's paying for the gas and the diesel? Is it the school or is it a combination?
No, we would be paying for that.
Dr. Gregory?
So I'm just curious on this. The city chose to pursue this grant for when school wouldn't be in session because the school would be used as a shelter. And then the city's asking for the schools to then help subsidize the larger amount of the cost.
Well, that's their portion that they're asking us to share.
That's the portion they committed to when they went after the bond, right?
Correct.
And
Well,
so did we commit to that when, like, were we consulted? I wasn't on the board yet. But I mean,
No.
was the Board of Ed consulted?
No.
So,
Well, is this a question maybe Jim should answer more in depth?
I think he had the conversations with the mayor
Correct.
around this, so I think he actually could speak to it in more detail.
Well, with a little back stretching going
I still
This
think
isn't a question I don't think Democrats should bring up, I'm just kidding.
it's all good.
Mr. Kelly is the former Republican.
I know.
All right. No, let's,
So
pass on.
the cost of the language lab at West Shore Middle School 2 years ago was only $25,000. This year in the budget of $36,500, but you can see the clarification in here that $25,000 was for the computers only. Furniture, tables and chairs for the lab were not needed at West Shore because they actually borrowed the furniture from East Shore at the time. So we need it for East Shore now.
So East Shore is going to get new furniture? Or are they going to get their
Maybe they
old
were
furniture
smart
back
thinking
from
about
there?
it. I don't know.
So is West Shore,
You know?
is West Shore getting the leftovers and East Shore that was my question.
They already
Is
have
East Shore
the
going to get the new?
So, to be honest with you, I don't know the quality of furniture. Do you know that, Mr. Bradbury, in the language lab at West Shore? Or we can find out. It's,
We did
but
not.
remember, they gave it to them in good faith, so we could set it up, and, you know, but we can find out.
I'll check.
I know in the West Shore project, we're also moving the language lab, I believe, right?
But the furniture's not included in that.
So the next is a whole series of questions on frequently asked questions. So I'd like to suggest that, well, I'll do my best on this, but if you have questions, Jim Ricciatelli needs to talk about this. This is on the ECS grant. Is the money supposed to be designated for any specific purpose? So there's the ECS, there's the ECS grant, and then there's the special education monies that come into the city. But it's a grant to local government. I mean, you can see what's written there, and it offsets general costs of education. It's not designated for any purpose whatsoever. So what the city, for example, got was 11 million, which is a small percentage of the total amount that the city spends for education, given that the total for us is 117,000. 117,000 includes the benefits, health benefits that the city pays.
Million.
Million. Sorry about that. So, if you have further questions, I would ask you, we could wait till Jim just speaks to this in more detail, because he's actually lived on both sides of the aisle.
Does anybody, should we earmark that for Jim for tomorrow, or is this question sufficient?
It's sufficient for me, I don't know about.
Does anybody want us to earmark it for tomorrow, or can we talk about?
No.
Okay,
I think
great.
there's enough understanding.
Terrific. There is a per pupil allocation for instructional supplies, and it is actually frequently asked question number 2, and what the amounts here is literally quoted out of that question. So this is what I was just referring to. 32, does the money for capital improvement projects come from the city budget because the city actually owns the buildings and the Board of Ed just has use of them? That's not the case. There's a formula, isn't there, Mr. Bradbury, for what goes into the capital improvement versus what's in the
Anything over
Board of Ed?
$100,000 goes into capital, anything over $100,000 goes
Okay.
into capital improvement plan.
So that's really what the delineation is that if it's over $100,000, then it's in capital improvement. So an
Also,
example of that would be Meadowside parking lot, correct?
Yes, that Millside, West Shore project, the East, all the large capital projects go
Right.
before the third.
Okay.
Excuse me, and are we charged back for the payments on those bonds or the interest on those bonds? Or does the city take care of it?
No, the city takes care of that, we don't.
Right.
It comes out of the city's budget.
Right. It's all city.
We may pay a portion of it. Like, for example, there was a portion of monies that went into that Meadowside.
We paid a portion of it because we added some things to that. So yes, we did pay a portion of that because it came in over budget for the capital plan. But we did pay a portion of that, yes. But we don't make any payments on the bond.
Right. That's a one-time, that was a one-time payment as opposed to
Right.
paying every year on the bond.
Right. We
Yeah,
did.
well,
So the next one, question 33, the money that is spent on out-of-district costs for special education tuition, is it correct that the Board of Ed pays the tuition and transportation costs, but that the city gets the reimbursement? City gets reimbursement for tuition. They don't necessarily get reimbursement for transportation. They get a transportation grant every year, but reimbursement for transportation, the city does not. We don't get reimbursement from the state. We don't get reimbursement from the state on transportation.
Part of the excess cost reimbursement?
For special education?
Yes.
Oh, excuse me.
Excess costs include.
But it's all lumped in?
It's all lumped in, okay. So it is a portion. I stand corrected then. So the ECS monies for special education, that reimbursement does go to the city. We don't get that. But the assumption is that we try to cover in our budget, you know, what we anticipate will be what we will be spending.
And then we do get money from the city if we have
Correct.
a need that
We have to
exceeds what we're
request
able
it,
to cover.
right? We have to request it. Is that what we talked about on Monday?
We have to
actually
request it,
money.
and by law, the city has to give it to us. This is for special education.
Right.
And part of that is that we haven't spoken about this, but what all of you should know is the special education budget can fluctuate tremendously. So I'll give the example in my last district. The Board of Ed adopted its budget in May, special ed budget. In September, we had 9 special education students come into our district, all of whom were out of district placed. We knew immediately we weren't going to be able to cover the costs because it was all those tuitions. And that's the piece that happens. You know, the kids come in, if they're to be out of place, we're responsible for paying for it, comes out of the existing budget, but that's where the special ed ECS money goes at the end of the year. If we're short, then we go to the city and say, we need to spend this much money.
And just like Dr. Fieser was saying, last week we had 2 families move into district. Both of their children are out of district placements. So it's the unexpected that happens quite frequently.
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay.
34 has to do with reimbursable transportation funds. And again, we just spoke about that. 35, I don't understand the question and answer to 24, which is what type of services do homebound students receive? There's an explanation here. The bottom line is that there's 3 or 4 reasons why students might receive homebound. Medical reasons, kids who might be expelled, or based on an individual education plan. So there could be kids, quite honestly, that are school phobic, for example. So in their individual education plan, they're receiving homebound instruction. Or maybe they come in for a portion of the day, but then they receive.
Or we'll try to do the homebound tutoring at the school building after hours, and then try to build them back into their schedule.
Okay. So 36, what is the contract price for gasoline that the board is paying? And the cost is there, diesel, and then gasoline. And then notice it says, although these prices are higher than the current market, we had the advantage of paying less when the market was much higher. Check with the city's purchasing agent, and there is no provision in the contract to renegotiate the price without substantial penalties. So the next bid, hopefully if things go the way they're going, it'll be substantially lower. And please, I just want to remind people and the new board members, Durham Bus Company, as part of their contract, they pay the first dollar of every gallon of gas that's purchased. They pay $1 of it. So gas, even if we're paying $2.68, they pay the first dollar of that.
Mrs. Glenn?
Yes, Mrs. Krasinski.
A question on the contract. I don't know if you know this, the gasoline contract. How long is that contract? Is it a 2-year contract, a 4-year contract?
I don't know that.
I think it's a 1-year contract, but I'm sure Mr. Richards will confirm that.
And Mrs. Glenn?
Yes, Mr. Jurgensen.
Also, do we have to use a certain amount of gasoline? Or can we go to the station and not use gas from the source?
Good question. Don't know that. Okay. Not sure.
I saw gas at $1.80 today here in Connecticut.
Wow.
How far do I have to drive?
Regular low, the regular lowest price,
Right.
but that's pretty impressive for here in Connecticut, below $2. Right here in Milford.
Give us the station. So we're on
He'll sell us
37. We're moving right along here. The adult education budget is partially funded by the Board of Ed. How is the remainder funded? It's funded by monies coming in from the Board of Ed. It's also funded by fees from, the general interest courses. So if I wanted to take quilting, I'm going to pay fees in order to take that. So so there's three pieces. There's the grant, there's the Board of Ed contribution, and then there's the monies that come in from the fees. 38 is why is the extended day program just out of JFK and Pumpkin Delight? And you can see some history here that it goes back to 2012. The principal prior to Carrie Karamas at Pumpkin requested to be able to have this program because he just saw that his kids, so many of the kids were just woefully behind, they weren't reading at home, etc. Of course, he had the 3-5 school, and then Kennedy was the K2, so the kids who were coming into Pumpkin were from Kennedy. So what we did is that we created the program, and also for English language learners, of which there were a significant number in both schools. There still is at Pumpkin, but with the redistricting, a lot of the kids that have been at JFK are now at Meadowside. So quite honestly, this year, we moved the program from Kennedy to Meadowside because the needs are greater now at Meadowside than they are at Kennedy. This is a 1-hour program in the morning and a 1-hour program at the end of the day. That's what the extended day program is.
Mr. Whiskeyman?
In terms of the trends of English language learners, do we find that the number of new students coming in as English language learners remains the same, is growing, increasing, or decreasing over time?
It's actually increasing, and the number of languages, the diversity of the languages is increasing.
Mr. Jack? Yes, Mr. Jack. Mr. J.
This is related to a previous topic, but in two cases, in these documents and in the original budget, the statement was made that the expenses for the program at Pumpkin Delight was going to be paid for by monies collected. And in one answer in here, it indicated that we may not be able to cover the expenses in the first year because we don't know the staffing.
So this is around the pre-K program?
Right.
So we did not make the assumption that in the first year of the program we would collect enough tuition to cover the cost.
Okay.
So what we did was we looked to say, is there other monies that we could use to cover the cost? And we looked at the pre-K special education program, which brings tuition in.
Okay.
And we determined that we could take tuition monies there to cover the first year of the program.
Okay. So the costs are covered.
The costs are covered.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. So can we continue with the next set?
There's only a few, right? Yeah.
There's only a few, that's right. How many off-budget accounts are there and how are they budgeted? Now again, we made an assumption that off-budget accounts was a reference to the pre-K account that was spoken about the other day.
Right.
So with that assumption, these that are listed below are all examples of, if we want to use that term, off-budget accounts. Some of them total and some of them portion. So adult education, we just spoke about registration fees paid for a part of of the adult ed program, and they're the fees that come in from the general interest courses. The secondary summer school, we have kids who have to make up courses because they lost credit or they failed. So there's monies that come into that's in the summer school account that would be used then to pay, could pay for teachers and supplies, etc. The before and after school program at Pumpkin and Kennedy, tuition is paid by families for either the AM or the PM or both. Some parents have their kids in both AM and PM. The pre-K program we've already spoken about. These would be typical peers who would be in with our special education children. The typical peers pay tuition. Do the at-risk kids do too?
Yes.
Anybody who is not special education who's in the program would pay tuition. Ready to Learn. Ready to Learn is a pre-K program that actually was begun through Peggy Kelly, if you know who Peggy Kelly is, who oversees the Family Resource Center also in the district. Ready to Learn is a full-day pre-K program, but it also has a component that begins at 7 in the morning and ends 6 at night. So families can literally have their children in this program from 7 in the morning to 6 at night, and then in the middle, and then at like 9 o'clock or the actual pre-K program begins, but it's an all-day program. Family Resource Center is located at Matheson School. Families, could go there for educational purposes, for child groups where children of the same age can play together. It's a support system. So there's some fees that are not a whole lot, but that come in from that. Foreign High School has a child learning center. That's part of their curriculum that our students are in. And faculty actually can pay to have their children be a part of this program. So that's another example. And then we have the Milford Public School Food Service Program for all the meals that they serve. Milford Public Schools Food Service, there isn't a dime in the Board of Education General Fund, not a single dime that goes to the Milford Food Service. It's unbelievable how well that program is run, and it's run in the black. And they cover every salary, including the directors, is coming out of the monies from the food service program. And then athletics, so for example, gate receipts. So all of this, would be in the student activity account. That's where these monies are. You asked that question the other day. And the reason that they're in the student activity account is because they're being drawn upon to pay, sometimes continually. There's continual deposits going into these, and so they're put into the student activities account. I can assure you, the student activities account are audited annually. There's nothing that can get a school system in trouble, particularly a school. Having been a high school principal, I know this, faster than if you mess up your student activities account. The auditors look at those accounts like under a microscope because there's so much money that's going into that. I mean, in addition to these, you have all your clubs, the sports, it's all in there. But this is an example of some of the others.
And we don't draw budgets for any of this stuff. Is that correct?
Meaning?
Programs where we have the staffing and expenses, we don't draw up a budget for those programs.
So I'm still not following you. Adult education, for example, there is a portion of adult ed that is in the Board of Ed general budget.
Right, but there's not a, let's take the pre-K program at Pumpkin Delight. No budget has been drawn up for that.
Yet,
but it will be?
But it will be because it's going to be coming out of the pre-K tuition.
Okay.
Okay.
I think
So
Let
Ready
me
to
see.
Learn,
Yeah.
so does Peggy Kelly make up a budget for her Ready to Learn program every
Well,
year?
sure she does, and there are staff, for example, that are paid, several paras, for example, are paid under the Ready to Learn, again, the monies that are coming in,
Right.
it pays for some of the staffing there.
Right, so there's a budget for that.
There would be a budget, and,
Okay.
and part of our budget, we're taking 2 of the Ready to Learn teachers
Right.
off of the general fund next
Right.
year, and it's gonna be paid by the tuition that
Right,
comes into
okay.
Ready to Learn.
Okay.
But just to clarify, those budgets don't come before the board, we don't vote on those budgets.
No,
Correct.
no, but they're monitored. Again, they're
Heavily,
monitored.
yes.
Yep. This woman can tell you about every one of those accounts.
Well, just a point there, the food service budget, there's a presentation made to us every year, which does show us the food service budget and the fact that they are, covered, and so while we don't vote on that, we do get a presentation and get to see the exact dollar amounts and what's spent and everything associated with the food service.
You also do with athletics.
And with athletics too, there's another presentation. So while we don't actually vote from a budgetary standpoint on those, we do get to see what's going on there.
So moving to question 40, does a language lab enable other world languages to be offered? So just for everybody's knowledge, there's 3 languages offered in the district, Latin, Spanish, and French. So the question is, might students be able to take a world language using the language lab? The answer is yes. We would have to provide a software program that a student could do independent. So for example, if somebody wanted to study Russian, or maybe study a language, so for example, French is not offered in every one of the middle schools, but maybe somebody wanted to study French, we could purchase Rosetta Stone and then a student could work independently using the lab. But the larger question around that is, that we really would want to address is, as a district, is that how we would want to approach students choosing to learn a language beyond the 3, or is it more that we would want to, as a board, start to wrestle with, do we want to offer to all kids additional languages beyond the 3 that we do? That's the question that needs to be asked. But could it be done? Yes, it could be done. Okay. How are the academic support specialists? You know, that question came in this afternoon, and I needed to gather the data from the 2 high school principals, but we'll have that information tomorrow. Computer science pathways. So I don't know if all these questions have been answered. I think a lot of them have been.
Yeah.
Unless somebody has a particular question?
Yes, I think they were all referenced when we had the conversation.
The social and emotional curriculum, can you give an example of what types of classes or coursework? I think that Mr. Bird spoke to that, but there is an exhibit which at least shows what are the overarching competencies that would be part of a social emotional curriculum. You know, and at some point, which would be beneficial, even for example, maybe perhaps next fall at some point, is to have Annalise Faziano come and really speak to the board around this, and to help, really give people a much better understanding of what are we referring to.
I don't have an Exhibit 7, I only have I broke through Exhibit 6.
There's an exhibit at the end of the question.
Tonight.
Okay, I got you already, thank you. Oh, there it is.
Number 44, again, guidelines for the computer science career pathway. I think either we've addressed this or we said we don't know an answer to the question yet. 45, how many electives do high school students currently have? Which that also was spoken to. Benefits, where are the benefits for pre-K staff budgeted? Good question. The health insurance for the teachers and both pairs would be paid for by the city, because the city picks up the health insurance, as well as the Social Security for the paras. Remember, teachers don't pay Social Security, they pay into the teacher retirement fund. However, the Board of Ed pays for the employer taxes, Medicare, and then and life insurance if an employee were to take that. So these employer taxes, again, would be paid out of the pre-K tuition. And the 47, what's the impact of the error in the calculation of the natural gas? I think we spoke to that already.
Does anybody need any further clarification on that?
48, this is an energy question. I understand the building at East Shore has been expanded. Why is the cost of heat so much more? Mr. Bradbury, we put a lengthy explanation. Do you want to speak to it since you're living with this?
This has been a problem of mine. This is East Shore Middle School. We've added 21,000 square feet, roughly a third of the size of the original building. Not only did we keep the 2 boilers, but they've added 8 gas-fired rooftop units on this building.
Do you mind speaking up a little bit, Mr.
I'm sorry,
Bradbury?
I apologize. They've added 8 gas-fired rooftop units on this building. We do the 8 classroom addition, did the course and band room, so we've added more consumption on this building. We've also added some energy recovery units, which are gas-fed. So everything they've done to get it to a LEED building is not really helping. So we've also having trouble with some of the controls. We're getting those under wraps now with the building committee, so that should be starting to come into play soon. I'm starting to see better numbers. My October and November bills look much better, and I'm going to be looking at this account to reduce it. So, but that's really where we're at with that building. Question?
Now, October and November's bills were lower. Was that due because it was so warm out already?
It was warmer, but we're running it a little better. I don't have the contractor, the controls contractor, and the mechanical contractor are still running that building. I'm getting in, I'm lowering my schedules, but I'm finally getting control back of the schedules that I had in that building. They've been running it. I can't really touch anything until it's turned over. Now, the commissioning agent is going through all the units right now to make sure they're running to the sequence of operations, which they haven't been. And now we're getting them closer to the way the architect wants them and the engineers want them. So we're getting closer to where that building should be running. So I'm hoping to look for reduced usage there sooner than later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Perfect. Thanks.
It's just been a difficult process.
And the last question is, what is the cost of the PSA testing? And what you can see is that what we paid this year, $12,465, and that it's $14,000 is what we put in the budget for next year. We just anticipate there'll be more kids that will be taking it, as well as an increase in fees.
Questions on that? Oh. Okay. It's 9:15. So we have some leftover questions that we'll have to, some additional information that you guys will be pulling together. Some questions, hopefully Mr. Vincicelli will be able to join us tomorrow that we can address. Board members, when you get home and start thinking about this, I know when I go home from meetings like this, I'm up until all hours of the night because everything's going through my head. So if you have additional questions, forward them along so that we can get them potentially answered for the tomorrow night's meeting. Mrs. Federico?
Madam Chair, I'd like to offer a comment just on our discussion tonight. I don't want to belabor this point. I'm only going to speak once on it. But, going back to some of the discussion earlier in the night about adding programs, whether it's a computer science pathway or a language lab, and talking about test data, does it support the need for those things? I think one of the things that we need to think about is, my belief is that most students who leave Milford Public Schools and go to private schools, parochial schools, magnet schools, most students that do that are going to do that anyways. They're doing that for family reasons, for religious reasons. But I believe there are a few, and I know this because I've heard parents tell me, I believe there are a few that go, I've heard people say, Milford Public Schools doesn't have enough to offer my child. And those parents, those children are some of our brightest children. And we are losing some of them to magnet schools. And I completely realize, we're not going to keep everyone in Milford Public Schools. That's not my goal. But when I heard people say, we don't offer enough to keep those children here, then I applaud you for adding the programs. And I don't think we can afford to wait. And something like the computer science pathway for $4,500, that's a bargain for me. And that's something that I fully support. So I don't want us to keep going back and forth on this, but it was important for me to say this tonight because otherwise, like Ms. Glennon, I'd be up all night thinking through that statement in my head, holding it till tomorrow. So, thank you.
Okay. Mrs.
Yes,
Glennon?
Mr. Jagosinski.
I have a different perspective on that. Quite frankly, I don't have a problem if students, parents avail themselves of the opportunities presented by the magnet schools. We are never going to be able to reproduce some of the programs that are available in magnet schools. And if students are looking for those types of programs, we should support them in that. We're not in competition with the magnet schools. We provide a general education. If you want a scientific-based education, there are magnet schools available for that. If you want an arts education, there are magnet schools available for that. And we shouldn't be in competition with them. And we should not be in competition with private schools or with parochial schools. People should have a choice, and they have that choice. We offer one type of education, they offer another. And if they want to take advantage of that, that's fine. That's, that's nothing against us.
I agree with you 100%, but I do want to say not every child gets into the magnet schools that that offer those things. Some children they want to be able to do athletics, and the magnet school might not offer athletics, and it's impossible for them to come back to Milford and participate. Or they can't come back to Milford and participate in the athletics. And I will say that Susie, Ms. DeVice and I were on the Long Range Planning Committee. We heard it over and over and over again from parents on that committee that we want to see more STEM, more arts in Milford. We discussed many different ways to achieve that, from a specialty school to specialty, mini schools within the high schools that would be specialty, and the board, the board discounted that because we want to be able to offer, at the time, the board's feeling was that we should be offering all of our students the opportunity if they want to avail themselves of that, not just a select few students, which is why we didn't go with a specialty school or a school within a school, and the decision was made to direct administration to come up with the career pathways. That's how the board chose to address that desire, but this was a very, very strong desire from the community to see this type of program put in place, these types of programs. So, but I agree with you that we cannot compete with some of the magnet schools. I agree with you there, absolutely.
Madam Chair, if I may, one more comment. And I agree too. I don't think we should be competing with the magnet schools. But if we can offer more programming here, we can keep some of our brightest students here, and that impacts our test scores. So if we are losing our brightest students that would be happy in Milford Public Schools, but they want more focus on computer science, and we can spend $4,500 to keep those students, that's worth it to me.
Yes.
I'm in favor of enrichment. I'm in favor of additional programs. But if the choice comes between the ability to read and an enrichment program, I come down on the side of the ability to read. And, that is my concern. If an enrichment program is impacting that ability to read, I think that's a bad choice.
Yes, Dr. Gregory.
Can I switch the topic and
Sure.
ask a procedural question?
Yeah, is there any other comment on this topic? Yes, Dr. Gregory.
It appears that we could have our questions answered tomorrow. What then happens? Like, would we then still have the meeting on the 20th, or
Yes,
would we
we will
vote?
still have the meeting on the 20th to vote. Yes,
Okay.
yeah. I think people would need a chance to be able to digest, and so yes. But I will say, it would seem that most likely we will cancel our COW meeting. We don't have anything planned for the COW meeting for January. The practice has been to cancel the COW meeting since we meet, 3 or 4 additional nights during the month of January. So we can make that decision.
Committee of the Whole,
Committee of the
for those
Whole.
who may not know the
Yeah.
COW.
I'm sorry, any other acronyms? So we can decide that on the 20th, but at this point, it looks like we will cancel the meeting. So if there's no more board comment, I'll move on to public comment. No more board comment? Okay, so public comment. Speakers may offer objective comments about school operations and programs. The board encourages speakers not to express personal complaints or defamatory comments about Milford Public School personnel or any person associated with Milford Board of Education personnel or any person associated with Milford Public School System. Security issues and matters relating to the negotiation and grievances will not be permitted, consistent with the principles of the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act. Discussion of students is prohibited. Absent parental waiver, public comment is limited to agenda items only tonight. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Mrs. Burney.
Kathy Burney, 96 Centennial Drive. First and foremost, fabulous. Fabulous budget. Absolutely fabulous. Coming from an accounting background, I look at these things and I am very impressed. You guys did an excellent job. On some of the stuff, the pathways, best idea. I am one of those parents whose child is going to a magnet school in New Haven because she was bored, okay? The enrichment program wasn't enough and she didn't like it. So she's at a school that she's more challenged and she enjoys it. It's a lottery to get in. So there are a lot of people I know that wanted to get in that didn't. This is a great opportunity, and I think you guys are very, very smart for taking advantage of it. At my daughter's school, they started a coding club for the middle school. It has taken off so well that now they're expanding it. They actually needed another instructor because so many of the kids wanted it. I am talking about when kids get out of school. My oldest is 30 years old. Now, thankfully, she knew what she wanted from a very young age and went for it. But there were a lot of kids that went through school, then went on to college and got these degrees in things that they cannot even use them for. And I wonder if they were exposed to some of these pathways when they were in middle and high school, if maybe they wouldn't change where they really wanted to go and what they wanted to do. You guys are giving them an opportunity without creating a specialty school to give kids an opportunity to see what else is out there. This is a no-brainer. I think you guys, this should have come around a long time ago. Because I know when I graduated from foreign high school, I took all business courses because that you were kind of grouped by what you were going to do. It helped me tremendously by the time I left, but it kind of fell by the wayside. You guys are getting back to giving the kids what they need to succeed in life. You're doing it right. This is what they need.
15 seconds.
Go. Continue with it. Make more because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And anybody else care to address the board for public comment this evening? Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Christopher Thomas, 8 Argyle Road, here in Milford. I'm glad I happened by. I didn't know there was public comment. In another meeting. I would just like to echo, I have not analyzed the budget as thoroughly. I've read some summaries. What I would say is, having been very attentive to and somewhat involved in the long-range planning committee and the redistricting process, the conversations I had with fellow parents and fellow community members throughout the district was that in addition to the physical restructuring and going back to K-5, I literally couldn't go to any meeting, stand outside any hearing without people gathering around talking about, but when are we going to add in the changes to the education for the children? So what pleases me as an educator and as a parent is that the top priority is student learning and high achievement of all students. That's of the utmost importance. I have seen the changes in the elementary school with the 4th and 5th graders moving among the teachers. You can feel the focus on science reflected not only through the teachers and the administrators, but the PTAs are catching on with more science nights. And I think to advance that now to the middle school, where I have a student in West Shore, and onto the high schools, I think is exactly where I believe all the people I talked to throughout the last 3, 4, 5+ years that's exactly the direction I believe all the people I've talked with would want the district to go in. So, again, I haven't gone in depth, but it sounds amazing, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but one thing I will tell the Board of Finance and the Board of Aldermen when I get the chance is that it is amazing to have a budget come in this low and still meet so many different priorities. You really cannot find this in another district. I challenge you. For anyone who's skeptic, and I appreciate skepticism, we should all be skeptical, but that's the journalist in me, but in my days in journalism and my days in education, I've never seen someone be able to have this low an increase and meet their priorities at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't think there's any more public hearing. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Where is this nominating?
You said it was Milford, where is it? He's not going to tell us.
No, he's not. He's his own little private.